Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to our Michigan Game Day show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today will be the angel of the big house, Michigan beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. Game 1 is in the books, and it was a resounding win for Michigan. What did we learn about this team? That is really a hard question to answer. We did what we were supposed to do against an overmatched opponent. Simply put, we took care of business. That's about the only thing that matters in Week 1. 84 Michigan Wolverines got on the field Saturday, and you can expect that many or more will get playing time against Hawaii this week. It seems as if the only thing anyone wants to talk about, though, is the quarterback competition. Fans and media experts are all over the map on this topic. Some say it's clearly time for JJ to take the reins. Others say, not so fast. Cade wasn't sharp on Saturday, but he is the same guy who led this team to a Big Ten championship and first-time playoff appearance. Some might say, that's nice, that was last year, and you can't live in the past. If JJ is better, make him the starter. My guest today says she's not sure this whole quarterback situation is being handled in the best way by Jim and staff. Joining us next with her thoughts on that and more is the angel of the big house, Michigan beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. So stay with us. Joining us on our game day segment for the first time this season is Michigan beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. Happy football season, Angelique, and it's great to have you back again.
Happy football season, Mike. I mean, actually, we should have like a little holiday. I think like the first day should be a holiday.
I agree.
Have National Dog Day. They have National Cat Day. They should have National Start of the Football Season Day.
It wasn't Labor Day yet, but it was sort of like a holiday weekend.
It really was.
With the Colorado State opener. So that was a lot of fun. It's great to have it back. And, Angelique, we saw a lot of good things in that opener Saturday, and most of us expected we would. But the only thing I know I'm hearing, I'm sure you're hearing from readers this week, are questions about the quarterback situation, which is not going to go away soon enough. Let's start, though, with your thoughts and what you saw from Cade and his performance on Saturday.
Mike, I think I saw what everybody saw. It was a shaky start, and he didn't look comfortable, and he talked about it afterwards about missing some throws, and he did. And you look at his stat sheet, and there was the 61-yard touchdown, but it was a screen. I mean, it was like 3 or 4 yards, and Roman Wilson did the rest of the work. So, you look at all that and you're just like, God, this just wasn't a sharp performance. And I do wonder, Mike, if part of it is when you listen to his post game comments, was he looking over his shoulder? Was he unhappy going into the game with this setup that he gets the first start and JJ the second, and then perhaps seeing how JJ was, as Harbaugh said, electric when he came into the game in the second half, and I just wonder if all those things played on Cade's mind, and because it wasn't sharp, and I think we've both seen him play much better. And I don't think this was a very small sample size to say, he's not playing very well, but he didn't have a great first outing. But I think that he'll have a chance again in the Hawaii game to come in relief. So we'll see what he does with that opportunity.
Well, as you mentioned, after the game, you were at that presser when players were made available and Cade spoke, arms folded, sounded and looked like he was agitated and frustrated. And as you mentioned, he may have been looking over his shoulder, but he really seemed surprised. He wasn't surprised that both quarterbacks played, I don't think. It was just that how it happened. One play, JJ's in, and then in the second half, he's in a couple of series. He said he didn't expect that. That did sound strange, didn't it?
It did. And, he said he acknowledged that this is an unusual situation, what Jim Harbaugh has decided to do with quarterbacks. And I had asked him if he thought this was fair, and I think he finished his comments by mentioning, he didn't say being voted a captain, but that's what he was saying. And I think that he came into the season, he was voted a captain by his teammates. I wonder if he believed that was something that ensured his starting role. And he also I just think he was really not thrown off. I mean, Harbaugh told the guys what he was going to do a few days before he released it, but I think he had the time to let this simmer, and he felt. And I'd asked him, "Did you think you won the job at the end of camp?" And he clearly thought he did. I mean, he thought he played really, really well, and from all accounts, he was playing really well. But JJ came on late, so I don't know. It was really difficult to watch him. But Mike, I mean, people were like, "Oh, he shouldn't have said those things. He should have been more gracious." But this is Cade. I mean, last year he would bristle a couple times at certain questions. So he's always sort of been this guy who wears his emotions on his sleeve. So I wasn't exactly surprised that he was so frank, but I thought it was a little concerning for his mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So did I. And JJ didn't actually get a lot of playing time when you look at the big picture Saturday. He made the most of it. Looked good. As you said, my concern is, I heard you ask the question at the press conference yesterday, Jim, do you want him to go down or get down instead of getting hit? I don't think he went down on any of the 4 or 5 runs he had. He got hit. So that's something he's got to start going down, doesn't he?
He does. I mean, and I was like, asking him and convincing him that this is not going to affect his playmaking style if he slides or gets out of bounds. I mean, remember the Georgia game when he played? I mean, he took a couple pretty solid hits.
Oh, yeah.
And, he bounces up, but your body can only take so much. And, Jim said that is something that they need to work on. And with that in mind, that's why if you're the head coach and you've made a decision, let's say, that JJ is going to be the guy, you have to make it clear to Cade that he is going to be needed. I mean, who's to say, God forbid anyone gets hurt, but, the way JJ plays, it is he's very athletic, but he puts himself out there. And you got to keep Cade engaged because what is the cliche? You're one play away. Mm-hmm. I mean, and so I think that's going to be a very important part of how Jim handles this going forward, assuming, JJ takes on the starter's role.
Well, Jim praised Cade at the presser on Monday, and I think Jim saw or talked about with the staff what Cade was like after the game, so he knew. But to me, that's why he brought it up at the press conference and said, hey, Cade played well. And then he went on to talk about, as you said, how electric JJ was. But you get the feeling from listening to Jim, at least I do, that he's at least publicly just fine with letting this go on another week or so.
Absolutely. I mean, I really think I do wonder why he didn't start JJ in the first game, because I feel like that's where he's going with this. And I wrote something Monday just saying, I almost feel like he could have ripped off the Band-Aid in terms of Cade, and made this a little easier because that felt uncomfortable after the game on Saturday. And I'm not saying, their feelings. You got to make sure everybody's happy, a trophy for everybody. I'm not saying that, Mike, but I just think, you've got to handle these things, and players are different now, and buttons get pushed differently. And I'm not sure these are the buttons to push with Cade McNamara, a guy who did start every game last year, who was part of that Big Ten championship run and the 12-win season. But, I think Jim is willing. I think he's saying he's willing to go as, a couple games, whatever. I mean, 1 minute I think he's saying, okay, this could alternate for a couple more, like into the fourth game. Or then I think he's saying, well, yeah, they'd like to have it decided by game 3. So I think he's been a little all over the place without being very definitive, but always, kind of having a plausible deniability when you say, but you said this. And he's like, well, no, this is what I really said. So I don't know. I mean, I all along I thought that they would have a starter either going into Iowa or coming out of that game. And I think just the way my gut feeling is that he will have a starter before that game, and I think that all signs point toward J.J. McCarthy.
And I agree with you on that. So we'll let it play out here in the next week or so, but I think that's the direction we're headed to. Okay, let's talk about the offense and what we saw for a few minutes, Angelique. They had some red zone issues in the first half, sort of like last year, but overall, there really wasn't much to nitpick about that offensive performance, was there?
No, I don't think so. And you got to see, you saw Corum and Edwards, who I thought looked really good. But C.J. Stokes is the guy that I kept talking about in the preseason and thought he would be the third back. And I think he's going to be really good. I think next year he'll be a guy who's going to be a big factor in their run game. I thought it was interesting how they handled the injury to left tackle. Not surprised, obviously, that Carson started for Ryan Hayes, but then when Carson went out with the ankle injury, they bumped Keegan over, a guy who plays guard. He hasn't really played tackle. And, they've talked a lot about the depth at the offensive line, and I thought, well, then where is the other tackle? Where's the third string tackle instead of bumping, Keegan over? So I thought that was a little interesting, but all in all, I just think, Mike, I don't know if you feel like this. Everyone's like, oh, you got to keep it vanilla, non-conference, don't show your hand. And I'm just like, well, everyone knows what your hand is. You have speedy receivers. You have this athleticism and speed. Take advantage of it. Work on some plays. I mean, go downfield. Just be a little, like using Jim's word, electric. So I was a little disappointed that there wasn't that, and maybe they'll do it Saturday with a quarterback who makes those kinds of throws. So no, yeah, I mean that's nitpicking, but all in all, I thought they looked fine. But you got to see them against a real opponent, and that's gonna be a few weeks.
No, and I agree, and I agree with you too. I think let's turn them loose, let them play, because you don't want to get to Iowa and say,
right.
Here's what we're going to do. This is the game plan, and it's different than the first 4 games. So. Turn them loose. Come on. You're right. Everyone knows that we have deep, speedy receivers, a deep, talented backfield. Let the guys get some work and run the offense you're going to run the rest of the year. But, hey, we'll see. There weren't any players that put up big numbers, either rushing or reception-wise, because, of course, so many of them got on the field. I think 84, Jim said. But what was obvious on Saturday is the team has so many weapons and options to use, don't they?
So many weapons. I mean, Roman Wilson looked blazing on that a 61-yard touchdown run and reception run. I mean, it really was mostly his run. And, I mean, I thought everybody was excited when Ronnie Bell made his first catch. I mean, he was targeted twice and had the one catch. And I want to see more Andre Anthony. I mean, I get it. You want to get all these guys on the field and get them some playing experience or just, to have their moment. But I do want to see I really want to see Andre Anthony. I really want to see more Darius Clemens. I think that these kind of games also afford you that versus getting, 100 players on the field, which, I know that's important to Jim. So, I mean, that's why he's getting $8 million and you and I aren't. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talent there, and there's no Hassan Haskins, and I still think that's the biggest loss. Maybe even in some ways, to me, bigger than Ojabo and Hutchinson going into the season. I thought that even before I saw the seven or 8 sacks, however way you're counting the Mike Morris sack. But I think they don't have someone to replace him. I think Stokes will be the closest thing to that. So I think that's going to be really interesting as the season wears on. Like, who's really going to emerge? And I'm a real CJ Stokes person. I think he's somebody who's going to really be a good factor, a good tailback to factor in for them late in the season.
No, I agree with you. He looked really fast. I mean, I heard he was fast, but he hits that hole and he runs very low, so I like that kid. But he just doesn't seem like the kind of back who's going to replace Hassan Haskins. When you need a yard, you need 2 yards and someone to move the pile. Flat out, we don't have anyone like that. So you're right. It's going to be interesting to see how he fits into the picture. But I must say the biggest surprise to me on Saturday was the play of the defense. I just really didn't know. And I don't know if Saturday was really a good indication because it was against such an inferior opponent, but they looked fast and solid at every position group, didn't they?
They really did. And again, like we're talking about the offense, open the playbook a little bit. I thought they knew they were playing a team that really was just not very good on offense, or defense. And they took advantage of it, and they had guys rotating, and they were all, as they said, eating, and that was quite a performance. So 11 tackles for loss, and I did count the Mike Morris sack as a sack when on the fumble play and on the scoop and score. So they had a defensive touchdown, they had the interception. I thought all in all this looked really good, and talking to the defensive players, I think they really like Jesse Minter. Not just because the defense hasn't really changed and the language hasn't changed, but I think he's a little more easygoing than Mike McDonald, and I think they like playing for him. Not that they didn't like playing for McDonald, that's not what I'm saying, but this has been a very good transition for them in terms of a defensive coordinator, and clearly Mike Elston has played a role in this too, and getting this defensive line ready to go. And Mozzie Smith. Well, it was Mike Morris who was quoting Mozzie Smith saying this year that the defense wasn't going to go through 2 people. It was going to go through 11, and I think that's what they proved on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Nice performance. Got a lot of bodies in the game, so we'll see. I don't know. Again, it's not going to be much of a challenge this week, but an opportunity to get a lot of guys in the game again. So, but what if anything? This is so hard against a team like Colorado State, Angelique. What did we learn about this Michigan team in Game 1? Really, anything of consequence?
No. I mean, I don't think you can say what this identity is. I really don't know that. And going into last season, I think it was Ryan Hayes. I remember asking him. It was preseason camp. I said, "Is there an identity yet?" And he answered right away, "Yes, we're going to be physical. We're going to run down your throat." And I don't know that we know that yet about this offense. Is it let's say JJ's the quarterback. Is it going to be a little bit more wide open and razzle dazzle and those kinds of things? Maybe. But I think on defense, again, really the caveat of these first couple opponents being just not very good. I think you do see that they have a chip on their shoulder, that I think they did get tired of listening to, well, how are they going to replace Aiden? How are they going to replace Ojabo? And I think they've rallied around that. So I think you get a sense that this defense definitely wants to prove something. And that was my takeaway more than anything, because I just don't think you can define what this offense is yet until this quarterback situation is resolved.
No, I agree with you. Another thing I was thinking about, Angelique, was the play calling. When I watched the game later with Robert Griffin doing the commentary, who of course knows Jim Harbaugh well, he was wondering about the two-headed, he didn't call it a two-headed monster, but Sharon Moore, Coach Weiss making the calls. How is that working? Who is actually making the calls? I think that's something we're really not going to get a picture against Colorado State or Hawaii or even UConn as to how that works, but that is something to really keep an eye on as we move on, isn't it?
Well, and it's something that Harbaugh has made this, he's brought up the cliche a few times, and it really irritates him that when people say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any, and I've never believed in that. I mean, I think it's better to have multiple good quarterbacks on your roster, but I have been one of those people saying, if you have 2 coordinators, do you Do you really have one?
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to ask Jim about that, but the quarterback storyline has really taken over because I asked him, I think it was camp, or no, it was spring ball. I said, how is this working? And he started kind of playing this cat and mouse game with me, and he's like, collaborative. And I said, well, what does that mean exactly? And then he starts rattling off the entire offensive staff, and I'm like, yeah, I know who the offensive coaches are. How are you going to call plays? Oh, that's what you want to know. and he's not going to answer it. But I think Sharon Moore is calling the bulk of the plays, and Weiss is being used probably in situations where more analytics are involved. And so I don't know if that's like red zone, that kind of situation, but that's what that's what he does. He's an analytics guy. But I do believe Sharon Moore is probably calling the bulk of the game.
Well, no, I guess when you're watching the game, it's so hard to tell against Colorado State when you're looking for symmetry in the offense and a philosophy of what Michigan wants to do. You sure didn't see that Saturday.
No, I mean, I just don't know what my takeaway is from this offense from Saturday. I mean, the takeaway really was the post game and Kate's comments, and it's going to be. I just think it's going to be really interesting, like to see how much JJ plays on Saturday, how much Kate does play as well, and maybe it's the one thing I want to say, Mike, is JJ. We've seen JJ come off the bench, and sometimes I mean, remember when Kate came off the bench at Rutgers when they're down 17? Yeah. Sometimes it's it's a different mentality. You come in and you have a different approach to the game versus the starter. So I'm very curious to see JJ in the starter's mindset going into that game. And I don't think I answered your question, but I went off on a tangent and I apologize.
No problem. This Saturday, of course, Hawaii rolls into town. I should say they limp 8,000 miles into town, and they have just been pummeled in their first two games at home. It's been ugly. But my first question is, why the heck is this a night game, Angelique?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess because Big Ten Network saw that it was available and took it. I mean, yeah. I think that's something that fills their lineup need, and it's puzzling to me, but they didn't ask us. But I do wonder, like the next night game. I've all along thought it would be Michigan State, and I know some people think it's Penn State. I still think it's gonna be a night game with Michigan State, but when I saw 8 p.m. for Hawaii, I'm like, why? But, it'll be interesting. I'm sure people will still come out and have a good time and enjoy what should be, I would suspect, a rout of a really bad team.
Very bad team, and they know it. They're not. It seems like they've admitted that. So, yeah, it's going to be ugly. But if nothing else, though, it's another game that allows Jim to play a lot of bodies again, Angelique. And yesterday at the presser, he said maybe 100, which he mentioned. That would be interesting to see. I mean, even Jim seemed to admit this is going to be a game where we might be able to do that.
And it's nice. I mean, I remember, I forget what season it was. It was Rich Rod when they were playing Delaware State. And I got to know Jack Kennedy well later, and in his music career, wrote about him a few times. But when they announced that Jack Kennedy was coming in at quarterback, we all looked at each other like, who is Jack Kennedy? And I'm sure you think a little bit of that when you're watching this game on Saturday. Like, well, I'm not sure, unless you really follow recruiting. But some of these kids are walk-ons that you probably don't know either. So it's a great opportunity for that. But I would hope that in the first time, I hope they flex their muscles a little bit more on offense. I just think it's good to run those plays in game situations and let that go a little bit. Obviously not show all your hand, but yeah. I would like to see a little bit more zing from the offense.
Well, last week I was able to catch quite a few Big Ten games. No one looked overly impressive, I didn't think. I know, and that's unfair because it's really week one, but did you get to see any games in particular? That Ohio State-Notre Dame game? I
did. I got home. I missed the first quarter on television, but I was listening to it on the radio during my drive back from Ann Arbor, and I thought, wow, they look human in the first half, and I thought, well, maybe Notre Dame's better than I thought. And then they pulled out the game, and they played well in the second half. And I think there were a lot of question marks about Jim Knowles and this defense, and I've talked to a few people down at Ohio State who wondered if this really was going to work for them. Is he the right fit? and is this the right scheme? And again, I mean, they came back and they won the game. And but I thought, well, shaky first start in the first half, and then they got it together. I watched Purdue Penn State, and I thought, wow, don't you run the ball there in that last possession, and couldn't figure that out, and that cost Purdue. So that was because Purdue was my pick to win the West, and I'm not giving up on the Boilermakers to win the West Division. I think they're going to really challenge. But I caught a little bit of Illinois' game, and it was a good win for Indiana. But I think everybody got excited about Illinois' first win of the season. But I still think these are just teams that are going to be near the bottom and of the Big Ten and not with tremendous growth. But and Michigan State, that was a tough first game. They won it again, but they lost some key players and one to injury for the season. So I think that they'll get it together. But I mean, I don't think anybody was expecting for another Kenneth Walker to emerge. But I think that they've done just fine in the portal, and they'll be good again.
To me, the most entertaining game was the Penn State Purdue game. And if you caught the score later, you'd say, oh, okay. And they came back and they won it. But what was painful to watch is Purdue getting the ball back with, I think, 4:59 on the clock. All they needed was 1 or 2 first downs. They came out and took 1:33 off the clock through 3 times and gave Penn State the chance to drive it down the field. So I agree, they're a good team. Aiden O'Connell's a great quarterback. They've got to have some semblance of a running game here as we move along here.
I thought so. I thought that I found that so puzzling, and I can't think of the kid's name now. I actually mentioned him. I wrote about him the other day, and I just now I'm blanking on the Purdue running back's name. But
yeah.
He carried the ball. I mean, I thought he looked effective a few times. So I'm just like, well, why aren't you doing this? And that was puzzling. And because I think Penn State is suspect, but I thought Clifford, who is in his 10th season now at Penn State, I wondered if they're going to be the Sean Clifford everybody saw in his freshman year and did a good job. And is it going to be that quarterback, or is it going to be the one that really sort of kind of fell off a little bit? He looks better. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Penn State goes going forward, too. But I still think I'm still a believer in Purdue. Can't believe I'm saying that, but I just said it.
No, I agree. And defensively, they didn't look half bad either. So it'll be fun to watch them, and that'll be nice in the West. Final question before we let you get away, though, Angelique. I think it's safe to say fans should enjoy these first 3 weeks, because after that, we have Big Ten business to start taking care of. Do you see Iowa as the first real test for this Michigan team because it's on the road? Or do you think Maryland, with that really talented offense, is going to give Michigan problems the week before?
I think Maryland. And that was even before I saw the Iowa game the other day. We watched a little bit of that as we were sitting in the post-game press conference Saturday, and everybody's like, whoa, what's going on there? 2 safeties, and was like, Iowa's going to be better. And I said, well, it's really not that much different than the team that Michigan annihilated in Indianapolis. And I get it. It's a Kinnick. And I keep hearing, the Iowa people are telling me, no, they think it's going to be an early game. And people in Michigan think it might be a night game, which, I think that plays into Iowa's favor a little bit more. That is a very tough place to play. But I think Maryland's offense is much more it's high octane. It can be trouble, and I think that's definitely going to be the bigger test for Michigan's defense.
Yeah, and their defense looks a lot better too.
It does, but I think that the offense, I don't know. I mean, I think that they've got some big play capability, and they've shown it before, and I think that's going to be really where you get a sense of what this Michigan defense, what their identity is, and I thought Steve Clinkscale was really beating the drum in preseason camp about more turnovers, and you saw one in the opener. Probably could be more, and I think they're going to put that to the test against the Terps.
Here with us on our game day segment this week as we get ready for that night game against Hawaii has been Michigan beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. First time on the show this year, Angelique. We hope many more times. So as always, though, we appreciate you being with us. and look forward to that next visit.
I look forward to the Ohio State game
Yes.
podcast. I think that's the one I'm thinking about. As the season's starting, I'm already thinking about the last game of the season, the regular season. So
Well, we all have to keep
That's
an
where my
eye on
mind
that
is.
last game of the season. So for sure, we will have you back then.
thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
On Quick Hits today, no major injuries or updates to talk about other than starting tackle Carson Barnhart and his sprained ankle. Jim said it isn't serious, but they'll hold him out this week and not take any chances. It sounds like linebacker Nakai Hill-Green should be ready to go Saturday, but we will see. Here are a few game day facts. Michigan leads the series with Hawaii 3-0. The first meeting was on December 6, 1986 in Honolulu, a 27-10 Michigan win. The last game was here in Ann Arbor on September 3rd of 2016. We prevailed by a score of 63-3. Head coach Tommy Chang is in his first year as head man at his alma mater. This is also his first head coaching position. Last year, Hawaii was 3-5 in the Mountain West, 6-7 overall. They returned 7 starters, 4 on offense and 2 on defense. Because of the coaching change, they have 58 new players on the roster. Hawaii comes into Saturday's action 0-2. They were pummeled in their opener by Vanderbilt and then beat up again on Saturday night by Western Kentucky. The weatherman says it should be a beautiful day in Ann Arbor, mostly cloudy and 84 degrees with a very small chance of rain. Temps at kickoff Saturday night should be in the mid-70s, dropping into the 60s during the game. Simply put, Hawaii is not a good team right now. They know it, and so do we. This is a game much like last week's. Michigan needs to take care of business. As Jim says, just win, get better, and stay healthy. You should see a lot of players get action again this week in the Big House. Next week, we welcome UConn back to Michigan Stadium. Our scheduled guest on Tuesday's Visitors Edition is the radio play-by-play voice of the Huskies, Mike Crispino. On Thursday's Michigan Game Day show, we hope to have Chris Ballas from the Wolverine. So tell your family and friends about the show, and make sure you join us right here next week. That will do it for another show. Enjoy another night game in the Big House. Think victory, beat Hawaii. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!